Petra has been working with Yemeni manuscripts on astrology, and not only astrology, calendrical matters, and all sorts of elements, useful elements of almanac style things. And she has a project, and she's working. She worked till very recently with the IKGF
Yes.
in the Erlangen University. And she has been editing this Yemeni manuscript from the 13th century, and we're going to have a fragment of that.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Luis, and everybody who makes it possible that I'm here. To be honest, it feels a little bit like a class meeting where some people are deeply missed, and one person in specifically. So I'm really glad to be here and to have an audience for what I will present to you today. It's similar to what Charles did, an episode, rather than an overview like Dorian did this morning, but I hope it brings something new to you. The main question is, what are we doing today? Are we playing chess or planting a tree? And the answer is quite simple, at least when looking up this question in the Kitāb al-Tabṣira al-nujūm. That is a title of a Yemeni treatise from the 13th century that one might translate by Enlightenment in the Science of the Stars. The author of this treatise, his oeuvre and the treatise itself, the Tabṣira or Enlightenment, and all what depends on it and its significance and so on, I will have a look on it later. Let me first answer this question. Shall we better play chess today or planting a tree? Let's see if this works. This double argument table you see on the screen is part of the Tabṣira's chapter 40 in the Oxford manuscript, the more reliable of the two copies we have at hand, and it forms the basis of my talk and of my research because it's much closer to the original. It's from 14th century Yemen, probably, and the treatise itself is from the 13th century, end of the 13th century. What you have here is in the top row, and I have to cheat a little bit because my table was too big for this small manuscript. You have the zodiacal signs. In this case, because it's a left-hand page, it starts on the left-hand side, and then it goes through the signs. Yep. So in the top row and in the column, you get several activities. What is our question here is playing with trick-track today or chess. And what follows in this line, and I hope this is, you can see it. So you have here the activities, you have here the zodiacal signs, and here the recommendations. And this recommendation depends on the lunar position. That's why you have the zodiacal signs in the top line. And the prognostications are just standardized. So if, for example, they're just 3 words, what your activity may be. It's either commendable, reprehensible, or ambiguous. And these 3 words are arranged in these, I would say, squeezed donut form, written the words vertically, horizontally, and diagonally to form this picture. And so we find for the question playing trick-track or chess, that it's commendable when the moon is in Aries. When it is in Taurus, it's reprehensible. When in Gemini, it's again commendable. If the moon is in Cancer, it's ambiguous. If it's in Leo, it's reprehensible. And so we go through all the lunar positions, go the moon through the zodiac, and tells you if it's recommendable to do it's a good idea to play chess today, or it's better to do something else. And the other activities mentioned here, and this is still work in progress, that's why there are some, let's say, lacuna in my translations, because I'm still working on this. And if it becomes probably obvious, it's quite condensed form of information, not that easy to figure out, because you don't have complete sentences where the context helps in the end. So the activities we find here is, do we cancel the treaty? Shall we consulting the minister? Shall we go for riding and exercises today? Shall we seek clothing from companions? Do something with friends, playing trick-track or chess? Departure but not arrival? Shall we do bloodletting today? Bathing, cutting nails, amusing, refreshing? And for all of these activities you get, depending on the position of the moon in the zodiac, one of three prognostications. It's either a good idea, a bad idea, or it's all the same. Altogether, this chapter 40 comprises 4 tables, each with 12 activities listed, so that there are 48 activities altogether. And this is only the first part of chapter 40. The huger part of this chapter provides, if I remember correctly, 360 omens or signs. For example, the croaking of a cock, or the barking of a dog, or sneezing in a cushion, or all these things you are probably familiar from the Mesopotamian sources, and also again organized according to the lunar position in the zodiac. But this time the prognostications are more elaborate, so we get something like it prognosticates wealth, health, and so on and so on. But what we concentrate today are the elections, and there are only these 4 tables. These are the first one with, just to give you some orientation again. Here again is like are we playing chess or trick-track. So this is the page I already have shown you. But so we have the 2 tables on opposite pages, and you see that it changes. You have on the left-hand page the activities here, and on the right-hand page the activities on the side. So it's like a mirror-wise then. And what comes up here in the next page of activities concerns the sitting of the kings on something, calling for a hunt, setting out for war, doing something with the troops, raid and horse races, protection treaties, correspondences with king, several meetings where I don't know at the moment with whom, and another treaty. And again, you get for all these activities, depending on the position of the moon in the zodiac, the information if it is a good idea, a bad idea, or it's all the same. And these are the following 2 pages. They look a little bit different because these 3 adjectives are, in this case, let's say, I would say, probably written a little bit more like Easter egg than donuts. So this gives you this slightly different pattern of recommendations, but the words are all the same that are included there. And on this page, you get further activities, like shall we buy a property today, or a riding animal? Shall we buy jewels? Shall we buy gold? Then we came to medical things, like shall we drink a laxative today? Do correspondence, something with books? Shall we meet kings today, or scribes, or noblemen? And so on and so on. This is this kind of activities, very similar to what Dorian said concerning the oracles and the Cathartic astrology. This kind of, and we can probably summarize this a little bit. This is just the first try to summarize these activities. I think there's politics, like meeting kings, setting out for war, and so on. There's economics, like buying jewels or mounts. There is social things, playing chess and trick-track, but also sometimes marriage and so on, and a good deal of health and hygiene, cutting nails, drinking laxative, and so on. So whatever one is planning to do, one can check if this activity is in the list, and then next we have to know where's the moon, to look up if it's recommendable, reprehensible, or ambiguous to do it. And how do you do this? And there's several possibilities came to my mind how you determine the lunar position in 13th century Yemen. And I have to admit, I didn't find these solutions in the sources so far. They came up to me by brainstorming. And the first idea I had in mind was just observing where's the moon today, like the wonderful full moon we have yesterday. Just check where are the stars. And there are a couple of, let's say, tools that might help you. One might be the very famous Kitāb by a Sufi, his book of constellations, where you see on the left-hand side a copy of his of the treatise from Paris with areas. So you can use the book to find the stars or to identify the stars. This would be one possibility. The other idea, and this is a globe that is in the Institut du Monde Arabe, also in Paris. You can use a celestial globe and look on the constellations depicted there and see if you can identify where the moon is. So this is the first idea that came into my mind. The second is you use a table. And al-Ashraf ﷺ himself provides such a table, but in a completely different chapter, in chapter 22, where these elections are in chapter 40. And this is this table provides you in the first line the months, the Eastern Roman month names, and in the first column the days of the month. It's so you have here the month names, and in this column the numbers from 1 to 30. What you have here in diagonal split are the names of the zodiacal signs. So you can enter the table, by the month and the date where you are, and figure out the zodiacal sign where the moon is, and then you can use this information to use the election table in chapter 40. And the last, so this is a little bit more related to the sources than my first idea. And the final idea I have was you can calculate the lunar position, of course. First of all, by using a siege, these astronomical astrological handbooks from Islamic societies, just to determine the ecliptic longitude of the moon. These are just two examples of Ibn Yunus Hakimi siege, preserved in Leiden and in Oxford. I've chosen them because Ibn Yunus, who lived in 11th century Egypt, his treatise, his siege, was very widely used in the Yemeni astronomical traditions. But there's also another possibility to calculate, and this is also found in chapter 22 of al-Ashraf Umar's tabṣira. He gives a kind of a rule of thumb how to determine the position of the moon in the lunar, to determine the position of the moon in the zodiac according to your date. To summarize this a little bit, and to become a little bit more theoretical, time plays in astrology a crucial role. I don't have to tell you that, for I think in two different ways. And if we speak generally, I would say horoscopic and interrogational astrology, one reconstruct the sky, particularly the positions of the sun, moon, and the planets for a specific place and moment in time. And this moment in time is more or less exactly known, of a birth, of a founding of a city, of a question, an interrogation. And with this, so the time is known, but the prognostication is open. It depends on what comes out of your horoscope. But in election, it's the other way around. One elects a point of time that is recommended for starting or refraining from an activity. So you have already written in the table the prognostication. You have to determine the time. So it's a difference between these two branches of astrology, and this is a completely different view to what Dorian suggested. She included interrogations and elections in cathartic astrology, and I think her access is quite convincible. But I think what I have here, and this is not found in the sources, that what makes my argument a bit weak, but I think it's important when start thinking about how these elections were used, and this comes probably clearer when we come to more examples that I will show you later. Since this determining or how the time is defined can be differently or it's different what skills and expertise a user needs to determine them. So just quickly, in Arabic we have two terms for describing the elections, one figuring on the beginnings, ibtida'at, and the other one figuring the other aspect, choices. And this is just a summary of the possibilities I mentioned already, how you can get the lunar position in the zodiac in these times, as I think. But let me make this a little bit more clear. In this chapter, the position of the moon in the zodiac defines the time, and how complicated it is. It becomes, depending how complicated it becomes, the complicated becomes the use of the election. And I think with regard to chapter 40, it's quite clear that a user that goes with observing needs some basic knowledge of the sky. The one who is using the table, I think, has just to look something up, and the one who wants to calculate the position has to be more an expert of that. But this is only one example. And for instance, the title of Sahar ibn Bishr's treatise on elections from the mid-9th century provides another organization. There it is not the moon in the lunar mansions, in the zodiacal signs, sorry for that, because the title reads Kitāb al-Ikhtiyarat ala buyūd al-12, so it's elections according to the 12 houses. And so I think it's necessary to look on more examples. And since the tabṣira provide in other chapters other kinds of elections, and I think this brings a quite reliable, for most probably not comprehensible, cross-section of what is found in the Arabic sources of elections, let me first shortly introduce the tabṣira and its author. As I mentioned before, the full title is Kitāb al-Tabṣira fi al-nujūm. This might be translated by Enlightenment in the Science of the Stars. There are two copies, one in Oxford at the Bodleian and the other in the Bibliothèque Nationale Arabe in Paris. The Oxford copy is altogether more reliable, more complete, and closer to the original writing of the treatise. The Paris copy is from 17th century and has a lot of material missing, but adds also material that is not in the Oxford copy so far. The tabṣira The tabṣira is in the Oxford copy organized in 50 chapters of very different topics. A major part deals with astrology, similar to what is preserved in the introductory literature, such as Abu Mashar's Mudkhal al-Kabir, his great introduction to astrology, or in his Mukhtasar. And just recently I found that al-Ashraf ﷺ took parts from the Kitāb al-Mudkhal by al-Kabisi without mentioning the sources, as he do usually in his treatise. And another chapter is very closely related to the Akhwan al-Safa, or Brethren of Purity, their third letter on astronomy, and this forms part of their 50, 51 or 52 epistles that form their encyclopedic corpus, and is written in 10th century Iraq, or shortly before or thereafter. And besides these astrological topics, the tabṣira also includes astronomical issues, 2 chapters on instruments, this is in 45 and 46, one on the use of the astrolabe, and one on water clocks. And there is some magic in there in chapter 14. There are planetary amulets introduced, by magic squares as planetary amulets introduced. And we have other related topics, for example, geographical data provided in a Qibla scheme in chapter 37, or a geographical table in chapter 47. Given this mix of topics in the tabṣira, it's quite difficult to classify this treatise. But there are still a few tendencies that are quite clear. All the material that is presented mainly without mentioning the sources, is quite familiar and reads well known, although the information provided often not become the mainstream later. This is one observation. And new material is rare, and in general it updates information to Yemeni reality by, for example, providing examples for Sana'a, one of the major cities in the Yemen already today. To the author, quickly. Al-Ashraf ﷺ was the third of the Rasulid sultans who reigned over Yemen only for a short time. He was just reigning from 1295 and 1296, so near approximately a year. But he had a lot of time to write scholarly treatises and make instruments. And one of the instruments he made is already preserved and is today in New York, and this is the front side of the astrolabe he made. Altogether, al-Ashraf ﷺ wrote about, we know about 6 astrolabes he made, because we have the, let's say, testimonies by his teachers who describe what he did, and we can assume that he also made other instruments, probably water clocks, but this is, their sources are not that clear. And the treatises he wrote comprise three items concerning astronomy and astrology: the astrolabe, the tabṣira, and an instrument book that mainly deals with the astrolabe, but also with water clocks and sundials. He wrote on medicine, he wrote on agriculture, he wrote on genealogy, altogether around a dozen books. This is, here you have a kind of overview. And for example, the parts of the genealogical treatises is published, and the agricultural treatise is work in progress by Daniel Varisco. And what I'm doing at the moment is publishing the tabṣira. Some of the chapters are already on my project's page, where they are freely accessible. So this is so far a little bit background on al-Ashraf ﷺ and his tabṣira, that you can a little bit more understand what is shown you next. Just to come back, this is chapter 40 I already have shown you. And when I had a look on all the elections in the Tabṣira, the question arose to me, how shall I organize them? To follow the order of the Oxford manuscript, it did not seem suitable because the chapters are more or less randomly and independently, so this does not work. So I finally decided to organize the material according to how the moment of time is defined. And there we are back what I said before, that the moment of time is quite crucial in astrology. And I have to admit that I didn't have yet the time to check, let's say, the theoretical discussions on elections in the literature so far. Okay, for chapter 40, it's quite clear. We have the moon's position in the zodiacal signs that defines the moment of time in which an activity is recommended or not. If one might say so, they can be called zodiacal elections. And another example we find in chapter 5 that starts right there where the arrow is. And I think even if you don't read Arabic, the main difference to what I've shown you so far is quite clear. Here you have a continuous text. Before I have shown you a double argument table. And in the Oxford manuscript, each of the zodiacal signs is highlighted in red ink. It's not that nicely to be seen in this black and white copy, but you have here Aries, for example, or here Cancer, that organizes, or Taurus here, that organizes your continuous text by rubricating the zodiacal signs. And for each zodiacal sign, the information are given first some general characteristics of the zodiacal signs, then what is praiseworthy to do in this when the moon is in this zodiacal sign, and at least what is blameworthy. And the general characteristics you all know. And this is the example for Aries. It's male diurnal of yellow bile, the house of Mars, and so on and so on. What is praiseworthy in it is, for example, selling war material, hunting, riding animals, cutting nails, bloodletting. And what is blameworthy is meeting women, buying slave, drinking remedy, and planting trees. But these are also only selections of all the activities mentioned in this chapter. And here also comes the second part of my title, planting a tree. You can recognize it here. Okay, this comes from chapter 5 of the Tabṣira. Okay. And this information I provide you here for Aries is given for all the 12 zodiacal signs. So the chapter in itself is organized very systematically. It's like a scheme. It's comprehensive. It deals with all the zodiacal signs, but it includes much more details than in the table of chapter 40. More details concerning the activities, but less details concerning what is recommended or not, because here you only have two categories, good or bad. In the table you have three, good, bad, or in between. And so and these are the two chapters where we have these elections, where the time is defined by the lunar position in the zodiac. In chapter 25, it's different. There, the lunar position in the lunar mansions gives you the time and the information concerning what is good to do at that day and what is not a good idea to do at that day. In this case, the lunar mansions are kind of a second way of subdividing the ecliptic, not in 12 parts in the zodiacal signs, but subdividing them into 28 parts. So it's a little bit more detailed subdivision. And the lunar mansions are used for calendrical purposes, timekeeping, and here as a time marker for the elections. Again, I like to show you the manuscript, the arrow again, where the chapter starts, and again this time the lunar mentions are highlighted in red to structure the text. For example, here's Aldebaran, this is the fourth of the lunar mentions. And Al-Yaman, for example, here, there's Al-Hamam, so this organizes the text. And this time, we only have a few general information for each of these 28 lunar mentions, and a little bit chaotic if what is recommended to do and what is not recommended to do. And chapter 25 was already published in the 1990s by Daniel Berisco, and this is his translation here. So you can get an idea what is given. The general information this time is first an astronomical information, yeah, when the al-Sharatain starts, namely 12 degrees and 52 minutes in Aries, and that it's fiery in nature. And then comes all the information. It's if the moon is in al-Sharatain, it's recommendable to make charms for friendship and love, not to wear new clothing. Then what do you have else? We shall not enter before rulers, nor attend to their needs, nor communicate with them. We can marry during this period, and so we have all these kinds of activities, but not that nicely organized as in chapter 5, where we have the lunar position in the zodiac, and of course it's more crowded than the double argument table in chapter 14. And I collected I call this kind of election lunar elections, and I already collected some examples and published it in Dorian's and Charles from Mashallah to Kepler, and this is quite a long time ago. There are further examples in the Arabic sources, but we are far away from a systematic investigation of them. And to come back to the question, how do you determine the lunar position in the zodiacal signs? I think we can come up with similar solution. We can observe, and I don't dare to ask if it's easier to find the zodiacal signs in the sky or the lunar mentions. I think this is all depending on your expertise. So observing is a possibility to find the lunar position in the zodiacal signs. I think calculating the ecliptic longitude of the moon is another possibility. So far, I don't know of any tables and rules of thumb to determine it, to determine the lunar position in the lunar mentions. But I always hesitate a bit to say something general concerning Arabic astronomy and astrology because there are so many sources not yet investigated. In chapter 16, we find something slightly different, because chapter 16 brings in the planets. Here, the time is defined by the position of the moon in the zodiacal signs and by aspecting one of the planets. And this is the first page of the chapter. Just to show you this, you have here the 12 zodiacal signs. For each column extra, which looks nice but needs more space. And you have here the information concerning the aspects. Here we have the aspect of the moon with Saturn in trine or in sextile. Here in quartile, here we have opposition and conjunction. And this goes through for all the planets, always looking after the moon, aspecting and being in a specific zodiacal sign. Just to mention you one example, if the moon is in Taurus and aspects Saturn in trine or sextile, again, planting a tree is recommendable and building. I already have explained to you how you can determine the lunar position in the zodiac, but in this case, this is also half of the battle because you also have to know the aspects. So this becomes more complicated to use. And with chapter 16, we have to change my PowerPoint. This has technical reasons, and I apologize for this, but we have to go to the next one. But this is quite a nice break, because so far we have the position of the moon in the zodiac used for the elections. We have thank you very much, we have the position of the moon in the lunar mansions, defining the time for the activities, and we have this combination of zodiacal signs and aspects for the moon. And we come now to chapters that are quite different to what we have so far, because what we have so far was well organized, it was comprehensive, it was presenting all zodiacal signs, all lunar mansions, so all varieties that are, or all possibilities. And we come now to chapters that are where the position, where the time is defined by much more things, by signs, houses, planets. There come in much more information you need to decide if it's the right time or not to do something. And the character of the text change also. They are no longer comprehensive, but they provide examples. And let's start with chapter 44, which I'm investigating at the moment together with Louis, and it deals with the signs crooked and straight in rising, but it has some examples concerning elections, and this is just one I like to show you to demonstrate how different this is to what I presented you so far of elections. Yeah, here again we have an activity, the sale of slaves, but then we have to take into account the houses. We have to take into account the planets. And we have to take into account the signs, and all this together. Then we can decide if it's the right time to sell slaves. And something similar also happens in chapter 9, that also deals with a different topic, mainly with apogee and perigee, as far as I remember. And there are, again, elections come in as examples, and again they are more elaborated, yeah, because you have to take into consideration the ascendant, the position of the moon, the lord of the ascendant, and then you get the time. Then you would know if the time is good for doing something, for an activity, or the time is not good for doing an activity. And the final chapter I like to show you, and this is the final example to be found in the tabṣira, is in chapter 48. And chapter 48 is one of the few chapters that mentions you the sources, because in the headline it mentions explicitly al-Karshi, but I suspect it's al-Kasrani mentioned here, and it provides elections after elections, sides over sides with elections. This is just one example to demonstrate how they are made, and this is taken from Kushya. Here I took the example from either making or molding gold and silver, and then you have again the information. The moon has to be somewhere. You're specifying the sign. you're specifying aspects, and you specify the planets, and then you get your election. Let me shortly summarize what we had so far. The tabṣira is a very special case due to the broad variety of topics that are dealt with in this treatise. It refrains on the one hand to attribute it to one scholarly tradition, but on the other hand it's a kind of a microcosm that brings together different astronomical and astrological traditions. This becomes, for example, obvious that we have a table for geographical coordinates in the tabṣira that helps to find a direction towards Mecca, towards the Qibla. But we also have a Qibla scheme, a completely different method from a completely different scholarly tradition that also allows to find the direction towards Mecca. So we have in this case two different things. And I think for the elections we have something similar, that there come different astrological traditions together in the tabṣira. We have these simple things, let's say, where only the lunar position in the zodiac or in the lunar mansions provides you the time, and you know quite easily, without consulting an expert, if an activity is recommended or not. And we have the much more elaborated things, in particular in chapter 48, that mention its sources, mentions Kushir, that remind from the whole reading a lot of the Greek sources. And I think this it's quite important to have a look on how you can use these methods. Yeah, is it difficult? Do you need a lot of expertise, a lot of skill to use them, or is it simple? Do you need an expert to interpret them, or can you do it by yourself? And the elections are one example, I think, where we can ask this question and probably get a few answers about the audience or the readership, where these methods were used, were applied. And so to my impression, they belong to different strands of tradition, but this is just an educated guess, and there's definitely much more research necessary before we coming to a final conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Petra, for this interesting insight. I have two questions concerning the first question is concerning the instruments which are mentioned. Mm-hmm. Could you please elaborate on this?
It's two treatises, two chapters. Yeah. The one on the astrolabe is quite unusual. It's on the use of the astrolabe.
That is the planispheric astrolabe.
Again?
The planispheric
astrolabe, the standard astrolabe. It's quite interesting because it has mainly not the standard problems there, but surveying problems that are in a Sufi, for example, but Sufi is definitely not the source for this mm-hmm. chapter. And we are still, I'm doing this is chapter 45, I'm doing this together with µ'Mimura, and we did not find the source so far. It all reads correct and common, and it supports my feeling that the tabṣira provides traditions that not become mainstream afterwards. Mm-hmm. And the second chapter, dealing with instruments, deals with the use of water clocks, and in particular using the water clock for timekeeping so that you know the ascendant when the sky is clouded. This is the main purpose. But the text itself is quite difficult to figure out. At the moment, we are quite sure to know which kind of water clock he's talking about, but there are several passages we are still struggling with, and I do this chapter together with a colleague from Berlin, with Annette Schomberg, because she's an expert in classical water clocks, and so we bring together our expertises in her on water clocks, my on the Arabic stuff, to figure out finally, hopefully, what's in there.
I see. Yeah, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
My only short remark, the position of the moon.
Yeah.
Well, neither globe nor Sufi's star catalogue would help you very much. I think there must have been a table or a zeech.
No, my idea was that both could help you to identify at the sky the constellations. So that is not for determining the lunar position, but if you don't know the constellations by heart, you have something to look up. This was the basic idea.
I see. Yeah, okay.
But for everything else, you either need a formula or a rule of thumb or a table or tables. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for the interesting presentation. I have a few questions. If I understood correctly, at the beginning of the presentation, we saw the table of the signs and the position of the moon. Later on, you spoke about how this is modified, if it is in fire signs or in water signs, or any other type of signs which determines the right time of doing or not doing this action. But you also mentioned houses. Could you please elaborate a little bit more the use of the houses?
Probably it's easiest to give you the examples I have here. Just a moment. Let's check. Where is it? I'm sorry, I have to have a closer look in the houses. But if you took the example in chapter 44, then he says the target of the election is the sale of slaves, and then the sixth house is good for that. Yeah. And if in the sixth house the benefic planets are that, then it's good for selling slaves. And there is a similar example in chapter 40. I don't know by heart, but this is, as far as I remember, the only two things where you have the houses. Because in chapter 48, I'm right in the beginning, and so far I didn't find the houses there. But because I didn't translate it and edited all of the stuff, there might be pop up something too.
Okay, so maybe it's more the topic of the house and not the quality, like not being angular, occasional.
Yeah, I think in this example here, it's the topic of the house. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I'm working with these examples together with Petra. What he's doing here is he suddenly, without giving us any formula on elections, he exemplifies certain, for example, here is cadency and angularity, and he exemplifies with the selection. So he's telling that an angular planet is always a good position, except if in an example of a sale of slaves, then the planet, even with being cadent in the sixth house, would be in a good position for that specific matter. So here is suddenly turning into an horoscope.
Yeah. It's the chapter 40 is quite strange because according to the headline, it deals with the signs crooked and straight in rising, and he starts this quite organized, and then it gets off, let's say. And in this part where he, let's say, loses his organization, we have the examples on the elections, and it's quite difficult to bring this together.
Okay, and my second question would be a little bit more broader. Is there any formula to add human activities? Because the list of activities is definite, but human beings can do much more in their everyday life. So is there a formula to add and classify and to stick in this table other activities which are not included?
I think if you want to add something, you have to do a new table, or to, and I was quite intrigued by what Jeffrey said about the children coming disciples in his example, and I'm quite sure when we have more of these elections and can start comparing the Arabic information with the Greek information, the Latin information, then we will find similar examples of not new activities, but adapting activities to the new context. Let's say, I know one example for the second part of chapter 40 deals with this with these omens, with the signs, and we have this tradition also in the Latin sources, and it seems quite sure that the Latin sources rely on the Arabic ones, and then we lose, for example, the animal sounds you don't have in Europe. Yeah, so no more lions, as far as I remember.
Okay, but is there any hint or any justification how, in first place, these activities got in this table in this way, or it is just said like
they are just there?
Something that is, yes.
They are just there, and I think Dorian is on the right track. That they come from much older traditions, from either from the oracles or even from earlier time, from Mesopotamian time. That is quite a very old technique.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I have two short questions. The first question is that you said that there is this sort of a table where the aspect with a certain planet or certain planets. So the moon's aspect is also considered. I guess that in the table that you showed that Saturn was the planet. Is this right?
Yes, I said I've shown you the example for Saturn.
Yeah,
right.
but the right question is that is it aspect proper? So you are talking about nazar or application itisal?
I have to check, but.
The reason why I'm asking is that in the Hellenistic astrological tradition, they always paid attention to the difference between separation and application, and also there was this condition where both separation and application was involved, or there was this void in course where neither application nor separation could be detected.
Mm-hmm. I can have a quick look on at least on the headline.
I think in the headline only the name of the trigone or the sextile or something was written, with Zuhal, with Saturn, but I didn't see any nazar or itisal.
And in the headline there's neither.
Mm-hmm.
There's no information on that in the headline either, so I can't tell you in the end.
Okay.
But it's probably something worth to discuss together when I did more on
that's all right. It's okay. The other question is that this is also a very short one. That you mentioned related to the first table that there were only some abbreviations or some keywords in the first column for activities, and in some cases it was a little bit difficult to decipher what they mean.
Yeah.
Is this right?
Yeah.
Is it possible that there's sort of a comparison to sources like the book 7 of Ibn Abi Rijal, or someone who writes about elections profusely, could give some comparison?
I did some comparisons, but so far I couldn't figure out where they come from. What I'm doing at the moment, I started with chapter 40 to list all the activities that cross my path. Mm-hmm. Yeah, also in different chapters, so starting kind of glossary of activities. And I hope that when I find, let's say, meetings with scholars here, it might give me an idea for the meetings where I can't read whom you meet at the moment. So this is my working at the moment. But if you have any ideas, even if it's in different languages, to complement my glossary will be very helpful. For example, for the second part of chapter 40 of these omens, I worked together with some medievalists who do the Latin traditions. This was quite helpful to do the Arabic too, because it's just get your ideas what can be there in the end when you have just short snippets of words and you don't have an idea.
Okay.
So if you have any suggestion with what I can compare it, I'm very happy. This would be great.
Okay, let's talk about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's on. It's on. Thank you, Petra. That was very, very instructive. One of the things that interests me most about elections, I suppose, is if you can infer positions on human agency, perhaps also a theory of history, if we may call it that. So, what does it mean to elect the proper time, which was, the topic of your talk. And there were various things throughout to that extent, I suppose, I see this as indeed very close to what Dorian was doing. At one point, for instance, in your talk, on the slide there were the words blameworthy and praiseworthy.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that was your language, their language, translation.
It's my translation.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
It's,
because it's epidictic rhetoric, that language. It's moral. It would be very interesting if that were their language, but if it isn't, then never mind.
It's my translation of the Arabic, but it's a good point. There's a good reason why I have a copy editor for my English translations in the project.
No, I don't need to. Never mind.
That's not. No, it's let's say if it's not my mother tongue, yeah. So I'm translating from, and this is not an apology, but let's say to have the nuances, is sometimes quite difficult. And for example, it's very important that you say this has a, let's say, a by sound.
Well, it does to me, but anyway, but that's just me.
But then it's
perhaps,
something I definitely have to discuss with the copy editor too. If we probably use another a better fitting word, but
I imagine most people wouldn't mind. It's just something that interests me. It's not.
No, but I think
it's
it sounds a little bit emphatic. Yeah, so for me too. And it's
well, but on the other hand, it's not out of place in some of the other things that I read in classic sources on astrological electing.
Yeah.
Which what do you do when you do an election? Is it a kind of technology by which you seek to is it on the register of fas and nefas? What is allowed, what is not allowed? Which brings us closer to the world that Dorian was talking about, I suspect. Mm-hmm. Or is it rather about tapping into a cosmic reservoir of power by which you seek to? Actually, in the literature, in the scholarly literature on elections, there's a sort of tacit unclarity about that. If you read Eugenio Garin or even Nicolas Weil-Parot, actually, on elections, they have a very technological view of elections, which I'm not entirely yet convinced of. So it ties in with all of these issues, and I just wanted to pick your brain on that.
Yeah, no, but this is I thought about. First of all, you might have recognized how beautiful this manuscript is. Yeah, so it's apparently what is the content is apparently worth something. Yeah, this is one point where you can start thinking about the readers for whom is this text made. Yeah, but this is the copy. This is not original. Yeah, it's not a autograph. So, but it looks very nice. So you can present it, for example, to people coming to your house, and this brings up that you can use these tables for kind of entertainment. Yeah, just I want to plant a tree tomorrow, and I want to go for a chess play, and I want to marry. Let's have a look on it together, sitting around a table, something like that. Yeah, so it's kind of entertaining. I can imagine. Or if you're in the mood, oh, again, chess playing, oh no, yeah, have a look on the table, oh, tomorrow it's not a good idea. So your decision is, you're not the bad guy who said, no, I will not play tomorrow. It's the table who says, no, I will not play tomorrow. Yeah? So it brings you, so I think in this direction, you get a kind of everyday life activities that you can use for quite human purposes, everyday purposes. At least the first ones, not the ones I've introduced that bring in the planets and so on and so on. So these are just, let's say, entertainment and decision-making, 2 points that might be behind.
And just to say that there's a whole article about laudable by Derek Latham, the Arabist and doctor, in the use of the word Mahmoud, in medicine, which just, there's a laudable pus, for example.
Oh, this is great. You give me the reference later,
which was still used by doctors until, well, the beginning of the 20th century.
This will be great. If you have the reference, would be wonderful.
But I mean, it just means good or bad, really, basically.
Yeah, but good and bad, why don't you use, here?
Good for you and bad for you, let's say.
I think it's a bit more stronger than Mahmoud is stronger than just good.
I don't think it has any moral connotation.
It's worth to discuss. Definitely. I think Samuel had.
No, I was just thinking when we're talking about applying some kind of judgment, moral judgment to the word. I mean, I think blameworthy and praiseworthy does give some kind of judgment, that's more negative or more positive. But I was just thinking maybe something is effective or harmful. Maybe that would be a more neutral way to say it, or maybe, and I don't know the Arabic, so I can't comment on what the Arabic is actually saying, but that was just a thought that came to my head.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the input. Thank you, everybody.